In this video, I will talk about the brain regions and their functions. To begin, the cerebrum, which is this part right here, is the largest part of the brain. It performs higher functions and conscious thought processes such as memory storage and processing, and the conscious and subconscious regulation of skeletal muscle contractions. The surface of the cerebrum is called the cerebral cortex. It is the most complex part of the brain, containing the nerve cell bodies of the cerebrum. It is a part of the brain that experiences the most change through evolution. The surface of the cerebral cortex is wrinkled, as you can see here. The wrinkles, which are called fissures, increase the surface area of the brain. This allows for more neural connections than the brain would be capable of holding if the wrinkles weren't present. In the parietal lobe is the somatosensory cortex. It is a thin vertical strip that receives incoming touch sensations from the rest of our body. The top of the cortex receives sensations from the bottom of the body, progressing down to the bottom where it processes signals from the topmost part of our body. Next is the motor cortex, which is located in the frontal lobe, in front of the somatosensory cortex. It is responsible for controlling voluntary movement. In both of these cortexes, the neurons are arranged according to the part of the body that generates the sensory input or receives motor commands. Now I will move on to explain the parts of the diencephalon, which is the posterior part of the forebrain containing the thalamus, hypothalamus, subthalamus, and epithalamus. The thalamus receives sensory messages from the spinal cords and sends them to the appropriate areas in the cerebral cortex. Neurons with cell bodies in the thalamus relay neural input to specific areas in the cerebral cortex and regulate what information travels to the cerebral cortex. The hypothalamus controls emotions, autonomic functions, and hormone production. It also controls several metabolic functions, including body temperature, sexual arousal, hunger, thirst, and the endocrine system. The pituitary gland is deemed as the master gland because it regulates growth and controls other endocrine glands. It is the endocrine system's most influential gland under the influence of the hypothalamus. It is divided into the anterior and posterior pituitary. The posterior pituitary, which is this one right here, is an extension of the hypothalamus composed of nervous tissue that secretes oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone. These hormones are made in the hypothalamus but are temporarily stored in the posterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary, this one right here, is a portion of the pituitary that develops from non-neural tissue. It consists of endocrine cells that synthesize and secrete several tropic and non-tropic hormones. Next is the hippocampus, which is this blue area right here. It is vital to our memory system. Memories are processed through this area and then sent to other locations in the cerebral cortex for permanent storage. The amygdala is located in the temporal lobe and has a major role in the processing of emotions. The optic chiasm is an X-shaped structure formed by the crossing over of the optic nerves in the brain. Because of the optic chiasm, each half of the brain receives visual signals from the visual fields of both of our eyes. The pineal gland, which is that really small gland right there, secretes the hormone melatonin, which helps control sleep-wake cycles. The corpus callosum, this purple region right here, is a thick band of nerve fibers that connects the right and left cerebral hemispheres, enabling the hemispheres to process information together. The cerebellum, which means little brain, functions in unconscious coordinated movement and balance. Moving on, the brainstem is the oldest part of the central core of the brain. It begins where the spinal cord swells as it enters the skull. It is responsible for automatic survival. At the topmost part of the brainstem is the midbrain, which serves as a connection between the spinal cord and the brain. It develops into sensory integrating and relay centers that send sensory information to the cerebrum. Underneath the midbrain is the pons. It is a portion of the brain that participates in certain automatic homeostatic functions, including the regulation of breathing centers in the medulla. It connects the hind and midbrain and is also involved in the control of facial expressions. Lastly, below the pons is the medulla oblongata, for short, just medulla. It is the lowest part of the brain. It controls autonomic homeostatic functions, including breathing, heart and blood vessel activity, swallowing, digestion, and vomiting.